Well, yeah, I get that question a lot. As a matter of fact, that question, I just had a phone conversation with a investor that I'm mentoring just a few days ago. And so I got on his case a little bit about overanalyzing a property. And not really just pretty much going on gut review, like a surface review, kind of a gut level, not knowing at the gut level, I guess is the right way to say it, that this is going to be a good deal, that he should be looking at buying. And part of it is you've got to have enough experience and have enough properties cross your desk and review, own, you know, I mean that helps too obviously when you own, you know, properties over time, where once an opportunity comes up you pretty much know. Okay. And you know what I was getting on his case about is spending hours and hours, days, spreadsheeting and what ifs and all that kind of stuff. Now some of that is important, but I think many people, and I think maybe even you, have a little too much of that going on when you should just be pretty much pulling the trigger. It shouldn't take you that long to figure out whether this is a project you should buy or not, or you should invest in. You know, specifically if it's going to be you involved in it, I think. But that's like another story for another time, really. But let's get into your question, which really was, how do you really know which ones not to get involved in? What do you use to more quickly, is there anything you can use to quickly disqualify something or disqualify a property? Because, you know, a lot of what we do as investors, whether you're like you, where you're buying your own properties and running them and managing them and all that, or you're getting involved in maybe a partnership or a syndication, it's all about disqualifying as many as fast as you can to spend the amount of time you think necessary on those that do qualify and those that you think would be good investments. And so I'll give you an example of what I use to disqualify properties pretty quickly. And you know, there's a lot of ways to do it. So where's it located? Okay, I don't like that area, gone. That's an obvious one. Another one is how old is it? You know, I want it built after. So okay, so those are some obvious ones. But here's a not so obvious one that I use all the time, and that is how many owners have owned it over the last 20 years. Okay, last 15 to 20 years. So let me give you an example, two examples that I'm working on right now. So we're looking at closing on and owning a 140 plus unit apartment community that has had one owner in the last 16 years, two owners in the last 20 years, okay, but one in the last 16 years, okay? You compare that to a 180 unit property that I know is going to be available in the next couple of weeks here in our market. And that size of property, just on its size, we'd love to own it. I can just tell you that would be one that I would want to have cross my desk. Okay? But here's what I know. I know that that property has had, I believe, at least 3, maybe 4 owners in the last 20 years. Now, why is that? If you have a really good property you own, and it's working well for you and or your investors or partners, why would it be selling every 5 years or so, or less? What does that tell you? Well, here's what that tells you. That tells you that whomever comes in to own that property thinking they will do a hell of a lot better job than that current owner that owns it, by doing it their way, find out that the property is not a good property to own. In other words, another way of looking at it is if 3 or 4 owners of 180, 200, you know, when you're buying 5, 10, 15, $20 million properties, those people involved pretty much know what they're doing, for the most part. And maybe you could make the argument, maybe one or two of those owners, maybe they just weren't very sophisticated. Well, okay, maybe. That's a stretch, by the way. If you're buying a property for $10 million, that's a stretch. Okay, but let's just say that's the case. That's not going to happen 3 times or 4 times in 20 years. So what that tells me as an investor, as someone looking at buying the property, is if those 3 or 4 people couldn't get it figured out, couldn't get their processes in place to make the property as fantastic as they originally envisioned it to be, well, how in the hell do you think, how am I going to do it? I think I'm a pretty smart guy. I think I know what I'm doing, but I mean, I'm not perfect. No way. So one of my litmus tests is really, how many people have owned it in the last 20 years? How many owners has it had? Has it had, on one hand, like I mentioned, 1 in the last 15, 16 years? Or have there been 3? If there have been 3, problem. Let me give you another example. So mid-2000s, 2004, 2005, me and another guy, thinking we're pretty smart. You get into trouble, by the way, when you continually think that. Thinking we're pretty smart, we buy a property. We were the 3rd owner in the last 15, 16 years of that property. Now remember, this is back in 2004, 2005. We're the 3rd owner in the last 15 years of that property. 60-unit property, okay? I'll just give you the fast-forward version. We sold it 4 years later at a loss. At a loss. I lost a lot of money. He lost a lot of money. We were just glad to be out of it. Out of it. Because we kept digging ourselves into a deeper, deeper, deeper hole. Okay? Now, you fast forward to today. So that was what? About 16 years ago. Okay? 16 years ago. You fast forward to today, and I found out last week that same property is on the market again. Gone through 3 owners before it got put on the property again. So let me back this up for you. At the time we bought it in 2004, 2005, within a 15-year period we were the 3rd owner. I find out last week through a serendipitous phone conversation with another investor that this same property is on the market for sale again, and they are the 3rd owner of the property since and after we bought it. So what does that tell you about that property? Yeah, it's one that you run away from as quickly as you possibly can. Now there's always exceptions. You know, there's always exceptions to the rule. We know that in most everything. But I'm telling you, you want to use a really good litmus test in terms of what not to buy. How many investors, how many people have owned that property in the last 15 to 20 years? If it's been 1, if it's been 2, yeah, it's something you want to keep looking at. If it's been 3 or 4, I mean, I think that pretty much tells you it's one to avoid. Does that kind of help you? Okay.